Give it up for the next Vice President of the United States. And now it is my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Jill Stein, presidential candidate for the Green Party. Dr. Jill Stein is a Harvard educator, doctor, pioneering environmental health advocate, and an organizer for people, planet, and peace. I can go on for another 10 minutes. She's right here. We want to hear her. Please welcome Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor. I'm almost speechless being here. And I don't know if has Butch, I think Butch has, he's on his way, but you can see why it is that I had an interview with Butch Ware on his social media platform, and 2 days later, I and the campaign called him up and said, "Have you ever considered running for vice president?" And he continues to be such an amazing inspiration. And as we often say, between a white Jewish woman and a black Muslim man, we have the bases covered in this election. So there's so much to say. This is such an amazing moment, and as I look out over this room, this feels like this is the fulfillment of a lifetime for not only myself, but so many of us who have put everything on the line, really, not just to end this genocide, but as Butch said, really to end all genocide, to dismantle the empire and oligarchy and imperialism and colonialism and rising fascism. This room really feels like the fulfillment of that. This is the promise of what we have all been working for, this idea that we could come together across so many divisions, so many walls that attempt to divide us by religion, by class, by ethnicity, by social background. And we can all come together here to build this loving community that can envision an America and a world that works for all of us, and that understands if it doesn't work for all of us, it works for none of us. As Martin Luther King said, among many other things, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It feels miraculous to me. This is my third run for president. This is different from any other campaign I have ever been a part of. I have never had the experience of just walking down the street or walking through an airport and people run up to me in tears and with hugs and thank me for giving voice to their hearts and to their vision of a better future. It feels like that arc of the moral universe is bending right now, and we are all part of that bend together. I am personally so grateful to the Muslim American community and the Arab American community for being the conscience of this nation, for being the moral compass that we need in a nation that is otherwise adrift in the ocean. And what's amazing is that it's not so much the people of this country that are adrift, it is the political elites, it is the ruling class that is adrift, which has been really captured by the power of big money, the power of corporations, and have been disassociated, really, from the American people. It is amazing to me, and I am again so grateful to this community for standing up with moral clarity from the very outset, from the beginning of this genocide, beginning October 7th, beginning with the announcement by Israel that it would be cutting off all food and water and medical supplies and energy and electricity, that this community would be strangled, that Gaza would be strangled. It was clear to me in that moment that we must stand up. But what I began to see and was so inspiring to me was that the Muslim community, and especially Muslim students and young people who stood up with incredible courage and moral clarity to just call this what it was from the very start, that this was a genocide and we must stand up to stop it. The students and the larger community, I think, gave so much courage to all of us. And I'll shout out also for Jewish Voice for Peace that and you may recall that in the very first encampments at Columbia University, for example, there was a great outdoor Seder that was held as part of that encampment. Just like recently, there have been solidarity sukkahs that have been created to celebrate the Jewish harvest holiday, that from the beginning, there was such care taken across the spectrum of religions to show that this was not just on behalf of Muslims, this is on behalf of all of us, that we resist this genocide. And, you know, people often ask me, why am I running in this race? Why am I putting up with the things, the slings and arrows that you receive from the empire and the political establishment? I very much tie this to my experience growing up after the genocide of Jews, after the Holocaust and the Second World War. I was born shortly after that, and I attended a Reform synagogue. I sang in the children's choir. Our community was trying to come to terms with this question: is there life after genocide? How do you resume a normal life? How do you restore your faith in humanity? And we answered that question by affirming that genocide would never happen again, not to anyone. And that, for me, was really the direction of my life, that I would make sure that that doesn't happen, because that's what my family was asking me to do. And in becoming a medical doctor eventually, I thought that was my job, was to, address the evils and the darkness in the world, never imagining that we would actually be facing a genocide, especially a genocide that was being paid for with our tax dollars in our name by our government, giving diplomatic cover. It was just, who expected that ever to happen? I helped recruit a very powerful candidate that I thought was going to be the Green Party candidate. And why that really mattered is because the Green Party has access to the ballot. And for those who are new to this, the ballot access system is basically a bunch of tripwires organized to prevent challenge to the political elites. It's a series of complications, enormous hoops that you have to jump through if you want to challenge power. So if you are a Democrat or a Republican, you're pretty much automatically on the ballot if you win the nomination. But if you're a Green or a socialist, you have to collect essentially 1 million signatures across the country. And you have to do that before anyone will really recognize that you are a candidate in this election. So I had been part of recruiting Dr. West, and kudos to Dr. West. I'd like to just give him a round of applause and appreciation for his very powerful voice. And as often happens in the political world, things don't turn out exactly how you think they're going to go. And he wanted to run independently. Never having had a relationship with a political party before, that's a lot to come to terms with while you are actually running for the highest office in the land. Is a very difficult proposition. So it wasn't surprising when he decided it would be easier for him to run solo, and he did that, but that left us with like 3 weeks to launch a new campaign with all the paperwork and the administration of it to be able to secure the California ballot line, which is not a simple ballot line to secure. You otherwise have to collect some, I don't know, a couple 100,000 signatures. It's an extremely difficult, labor-intensive, expensive proposition. So, you know, the long and the short of it was, I knew that someone had to step up to run on the Green Party line, because as a new candidate in this process, if you don't have a grassroots network, if you don't have party chapters in many, many states who are watchdogging your ballot status in every state, you are not going to be on the ballot across the nation. If you're not on the ballot across the nation, you cannot challenge empire. You will be marginalized, you will be ignored, you really will not be the challenge that we need in this, you know, day and age of a genocide. So the long and short of it is, that's how come, you know, I felt like I had to step up to the plate. It was 2 of us who really had the capacity to organize a presidential campaign in the course of 3 weeks, and that's all the time that we had to launch it. It was either going to be Ajamu Baraka or myself, and a shout out to Ajamu Baraka, my former running mate in 2016. So we duked it out for about a week, and I wanted him to run, and he wanted me to run, and eventually he won, mainly because he's not living in this country, so it would have been very difficult for him to run for office from his base in South America. So at any rate, you know, I totally switched up my life, as I think so many of us have completely switched up our lives in order to stand up and stop this genocide. And we have to do that, because as Gaza goes, we all go. What's happening in Gaza? It's not only, you know, the torture and murder of over, well, 2 million people who are being systematically tortured, and it's the systematic murder of children and innocent civilians on an industrial scale. That is being normalized, and people are told, you know, let's go back to brunch, as Kamala Harris said the other day. Let's just keep on, you know, continue with our privilege, and let's look away. I was really taught as a child that it's not only the perpetrators of genocide who are pulling the trigger, it's the bystanders to genocide who allow it to happen. And, you know, in this country, we are not just bystanders. We are really, in many ways, we are perpetrators. We are not pulling the trigger, but it is our tax dollars, and it is our weapons, and it is our diplomatic cover. So it is so absolutely critical that we stand up, because it's not only those who are being killed, it is also international law and human rights itself that are at stake. Our country has been the top dog for the past many decades, certainly since the fall of the Soviet Union. Our country has been the unopposed imperial power. And we are not going to be that forever. In fact, we are no longer the the singular top dog here. There are rising powers, the BRICS alliance, for example, which is having its conference right now, which has grown remarkably from 5 nations. It's now some 12, along with another 9 or 10 partners. So this is, the U.S. is no longer the top economic power. We are no longer the top military power. So even if you didn't care about the moral stain of genocide, for the sake of one's own future, security and survival, we are not going to be the top dog. We very much, too, are the beneficiaries of a system of international justice, international law, and human rights. So for our very own sake, as well as for the sake of the victims, we need to stand up and stop this genocide now. It is very much a tribute to this community, to the Muslim American community. It is a tribute to you that the American people are firmly in the same camp that we are. One of the very first polls done about a month into the genocide by Reuters, I believe, it showed that at the time it was 68%, a supermajority of Americans at that time who wanted very firmly an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. That is a tribute to this community and the stories that you told and the moral imperative that you put out there that really brought the country around. That has never happened so quickly before. Maybe it's also because people could see this being live streamed, but certainly, back during the Vietnam War, at that time, the press used to cover the war. So we actually, we had real footage of journalists and photographers who were bringing back the pictures of the war, and the bodies were coming back to this country in the caskets. But even so, it took years to persuade the American public that this was a horrific war with millions of innocent civilians being killed and tens of thousands of U.S. servicemen at the time as well. It took a long time to persuade people. During the Iraq War, it took years to persuade the American public. But during this genocide, the American public was informed and was basically on our side, on the side of the moral imperative to stop this genocide within 1 month. That is a real tribute, I think, to the moral clarity and the voices of this community, and especially to the youth, the Muslim youth and the Jewish youth, standing up for all of us. And now, you may be aware, it's not only the people of this country, it's actually the people of the world, and it has been for a long time. It's been virtually every nation throughout the world that wants an immediate end to this genocide and the war surrounding it, which is enlarging as we speak. You may have seen today that Israel struck out at Iran, which it was known it was going to do. It seemed to have subsided by the time this event started, but it wasn't clear, is it really over? I doubt it. I doubt it because there were promises made after Iran retaliated for Israel's last provocations. Statements were made by Joe Biden as well as by Netanyahu that there would be a very severe price that Iran was going to pay. There was an intention expressed to attack the nuclear facilities in Iran, which would be absolutely horrific and extremely dangerous and a violation of international law. This is a supreme war crime. And Russia, which is partnered militarily with Iran, had already said, don't you dare. So Israel's intention to expand this war has been clear, from the very beginning. that Israel had every reason, Netanyahu had every reason to expand this war, to drag the U.S. in a way that could not be reversed. And that appears to be happening right now in a way which is extremely alarming, to say the least, including even prior to the attack on Iran, seeing how Israel is now expanding its genocide into the West Bank, into southern Lebanon, coming down hard on northern Gaza with this extermination campaign. You know, it's just shocking, unbelievable, unacceptable, the brutality with which the apartheid state of Israel is carrying out this genocide. It is an expanding genocide. It very much threatens the people of this country as well as the people of the world, with the potential for this to ignite a major regional or even a global war that could become potentially nuclear. So all of which is to say, what we do here today matters so much. What we do between now and the election matters so much, because our future is very much on the line. And it's not only the danger, it's not only the moral outrage of what this genocide represents, it's also the impact here in this country, because it is half of our congressional budget which is being spent right now on the endless war machine, of which the genocide in Gaza is the ultimate expression of this endless war machine. But that's not only endangering us the world over, it's also impoverishing us right here in this country. Why is it that we do not have the money to complete the cleanup and the assistance in southeastern Massachusetts right now? I'm sorry, southeastern U.S. and in North Carolina, for example. In western North Carolina, there are thousands of families that are still cut off, that do not have access to food, that do not have transportation, and that do not have communications. Yet only 2 weeks ago, was it, that our White House sent another $9 billion worth of military aid to Israel to continue its expanding genocide into Lebanon. Some $9 billion, and that's about what FEMA is short right now for actually providing relief to the American people. So, absolutely shame. And so, by standing up to end this war on Gaza, we're also ending the war on the American people. Because we're not only saying end this genocide, we are saying end this war machine, this empire. This empire which is consuming half of our congressional budget, when millions of people do not have the health care that they need right now. We are calling for health care as a human right for everyone through Medicare for all now. 1 out of every 2 Americans who rent their homes, their apartments, 1 out of every 2 Americans is severely stressed right now just trying to keep a roof over their heads, which is why rates of eviction and homelessness are absolutely skyrocketing right now. 1 out of every 2 renters is within 1 or 2 paychecks of being evicted, in the same way that some 62% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. We have tens of millions of Americans who are locked into lifelong student debt, who do not have the capacity to get out of that student debt in the current economy. 100 million Americans are locked into medical debt, yet this is something we could end. We actually could end that medical debt. We could cancel it. We could pay for it if we weren't draining our resources right now into creating genocide, war, and mayhem the world over through this bloated militarism. And it's not only the war on working people, it's also a war on our democracy. What is going on when we are told that we cannot stand up, we cannot protest against genocide, when our voices are silenced, when our heads are being bashed in, when we are being attacked by militarized police forces who are trained by guess who? The Israeli occupation forces that are now in the business of training our local police, often at these cop cities, which are proliferating all over the country. These are cop cities like in Atlanta, Georgia, which consume huge amounts of open space, and in that case, taking that critical open space away from the African American community and then converting it into, model cities in which to practice basically, military takeovers of the city in the case of some kind of, protest. This is what fascism looks like. This is rising fascism. We don't have to wait for Donald Trump. We've got it right now under many Democratic administrations across this city. And when it is the Democrats, not very much the Republicans, it's largely the Democrats who are in the business of throwing political competitors off the ballot so that they do not have to face competition here in this election. That, too, is a sign of authoritarianism and rising fascism when you're destroying our elections. Donald Trump is known for assaulting our democracy in preventing the peaceful transfer of power after the elections, but it's the Democrats who excel in preventing peaceful and fair elections before the fact, and neither of those are acceptable. So we have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And when they tell you that we are spoilers, no, it is, in this case, it is the Democratic Party, and it is Kamala Harris who has spoiled it for herself. She is deflecting by trying to blame you and me for her impending loss, and it is looking right now, latest polls are suggesting that she's losing, but she has lost this on her own terms. She could gain back many of these votes, if you believe her. I don't know. She may have lost all credibility. Indeed, she has lost all credibility. But she could certainly try to regain those votes by talking Joe Biden right now into a weapons embargo right now against Israel. She cannot blame that. She cannot blame that on us. She does not want to talk about this genocide whatsoever. And she would rather lose this election than stop the genocide. And that is what she is doing. She has no one to blame but herself for that. That is clear. They are engaging in candidate shaming and voter shaming and blaming. It's absolutely nonsense. There are two most recent polls that in fact show, they ask the same group of people, how would you vote if it's only, Harris and Trump? And then they ask, well, if it's Harris and Trump and myself and potentially other third-party candidates. And what it shows in those very limited polls, which are just constructs of reality, in my view, they are not reality whatsoever, but within these limited constructs, it is not Kamala Harris that we're taking votes away from. Currently, we're taking votes away from Donald Trump because Harris already lost those votes. She already lost them. And now the decision that some voters are making is, well, given that I'm not going to vote for Kamala Harris, who is conducting genocide, am I going to give my vote to Donald Trump or to our campaign? And if they actually know about our campaign, they will usually decide to vote for our campaign and not for Donald Trump. So this whole concept of spoiler is, it's part of this manufactured consent, as Noam Chomsky described it, that our politics is a matter of manufactured consent. Because we know the majority of American people want to end this genocide. They want a weapons embargo now. They want health care as a human right now. They want affordable housing as a human right now. The American people will generally decide to do the right thing if they're given a choice. 1 out of every 3 eligible voters in the last presidential race in 2020 did not vote. And these voters are largely younger, of color, and lower income. These are exactly the people to whom our agenda speaks, our agenda of social and economic and labor justice and climate justice. If these people learn about our campaign, we could see this election flip on a dime. We could see it do a 180. That's why your support is so important, because this is all about getting the word out. This is about doing 11th hour advertising on social media, on billboards, on radio, and affordable TV advertisements. There are some markets that we can advertise on. There's so much we can do. Our message is so powerful. And now that there is this potential expanding Middle East war, and, by the way, the draft is back, the Selective Service is back. Yeah, I know, this happened very quietly. The Selective Service is back, and young people between the ages of 18 and 25 are registered. You didn't have to go register, because now we have artificial intelligence to thank for registering you for the draft. You are automatically registered for the draft. They know where to find you. And the only thing that needs to happen is for the White House to decide that we are now in a wartime situation and we need boots on the ground. Well, what did Joe Biden already promise to Israel? That we would provide boots on the ground if needed. They already have, 5,000 servicemen and women with each of the aircraft carrier battleship groups, one located off the coast of Iran, another one now located off the west coast of Gaza, 5,000 servicemen and women in each, and another 40,000 U.S. servicemen and women around the Middle East, and another 100 U.S. servicemen and women sent along with this new missile defense system that was sent to defend Israel, because Israel cannot stand for 1 hour even without the intensive support of the U.S. military. So you can be sure, we can be confident, if this war expands, it's going to need us. And the Israeli army, as we know, is exhausted. Israel likes a 6-day war, or maybe a 6-week war. Israel has never fought a war like this before. Israel is on its last legs. According to a recent poll, 1 out of every 3 Israelis is now planning to get out of Israel. And Israel's economy is collapsing, and already France, Italy, and Spain have all now stepped up to enact a weapons embargo and are calling for the rest of us to do the same. So it is the continued actions of the U.S. empire that account for this continuing genocide and this expanding war, which we will most certainly be drawn into the more Israel expands it. And every day that goes by, the danger increases that this is going to escalate up that ladder, which lands eventually with mushroom clouds. And nuclear detonations anywhere are a threat to all of us everywhere. You cannot have a nuclear exchange stays local. It just doesn't stay local. It's not just the radioactivity and the bomb blast. It's also the fact of nuclear winter, which you've probably heard about, Nuclear winter, basically, you know, when you see that mushroom cloud going up, that is essentially a conveyor belt. It is taking debris and inserting it into the upper atmosphere where weather doesn't bring it down. The wind, the rain, and the snow is all below that debris. So it's up there for decades, and this basically dims sunlight, reduces agricultural production, and humanity starves. You know, this is a rapid train to the end of civilization as we know it. You know, Russia has nukes, Israel has nukes, and can't wait to use them, as we've heard many members of the Israeli government say already. You know, and of course the US has nukes. We've got nuclear submarines, 14 of them, in undisclosed locations, and I think we can be sure some of them are standing by. One nuclear submarine, by the way, contains the equivalent of 5,000 Hiroshima bombs, which, you know, we're talking the end of times here. I mean, it's just shocking and astounding that our criminal misleaders talk about nuclear, you know, tactical nuclear weapons as if this was an acceptable thing. This is absolutely deadly for all of us. We should be all signing that nuclear ban treaty, which we are in violation of ourselves right now, and get them off the face of the earth. But in the meantime, we know that this war continues because of our war criminals in the White House, and they deserve to be in The Hague, facing justice. Every vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump is an endorsement, an affirmation, and it enables the genocide to take place. So, you know, we don't let our friends drive drunk. We can't let our friends vote genocide. Every vote for our campaign is a vote against genocide. It is a shot across the bow of the empire, telling it that we are here, we are getting organized, we are powerful, we are strong, and we are not going away. And I am so gratified and inspired that the people who are supporting our campaign know that this fight doesn't end on November 5th. It does not end. It takes a while. Let me say, if we get into office, by the way, and we turn the White House into a greenhouse and make the world a better place, if we turn the White House into a greenhouse, on day one, I pick up the phone and tell Bibi Netanyahu the genocide is over, and it's over. It's that simple. Ronald Reagan did that. Reagan did that in 1982. Dwight Eisenhower did that back in the 1950s. So this is routine. This is simple. It's that complicated. So when Kamala Harris tells you that she's working diligently and, oh, those Israelis just won't respond, that is complete BS. I'm sorry. Total. So on day one, we do that. Also, on day one, we instruct the Department of Justice to take AIPAC to court for violating the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which is, by the way, a 15-year jail sentence for violating FARA. So goodbye, AIPAC. We also propose a military budget that cuts that budget at least 50% and puts those dollars into what we need right here at home. We also propose legislation to implement Medicare for all that provides health care to everyone as a human right. We also address the urgent housing crisis, and we propose a system of rent control across the country to stabilize the skyrocketing costs of rent, for starters, and we prevent, we make illegal for the private equity corporations to buy out our housing stock and drive up the price of our housing. We also implement a vacancy tax, which makes it quite unaffordable to hoard empty housing, and we force that housing back onto the market. And we also begin the construction of 15 million units of environmentally sound and concentrated affordable housing in mixed income units under the so-called social housing development. And we also declare the climate emergency because it is an emergency. And by doing that, we unleash over $500 billion a year in funding. Simply by declaring that emergency, we unleash the funding that we need to create the jobs so no worker is left behind and workers are transitioned into industries that are non-polluting, that are part of the green economy, and that are not just healthier for our communities and our environment, but are much healthier for workers themselves, who are then no longer exposed to the pollution and the danger of the fossil fuel industry. So this is a win-win all around. And one last thing I'll mention here on day one, which is to establish that this immigration crisis, the most important thing we can do to solve the immigration crisis is to stop causing it in the first place through endless wars, regime change operations, the war on drugs. We would treat substance use as a public health problem, not a criminal problem. So we would deprive the drug cartels of their riches with which they inflict violence on their communities and drive people here. We also cause the migration problem by failing to actually deal with the climate crisis. You hear a good line from the Democrats, but don't believe it for a minute, because when you get inside of their Inflation Reduction Act, you find that it's actually a fossil fuels first bill. It actually mandates the sale, the auctioning off of 60 million acres offshore, 2 million acres onshore before any major renewables can be built. So it's actually just a PR scam that this is a solution to the climate crisis. The emission of greenhouse gases has skyrocketed more under Joe Biden than it ever did under Donald Trump. So it's not true that it is, the death of the environment if Kamala Harris loses and Donald Trump wins the election. And besides, that's not what's at stake here. What's at stake is that we are going to win the election. It's not about Donald Trump winning, it's that we win. And as Butch reminded us, as Malcolm X said, never let your enemy tell you how many of you there are. Never let your enemy tell you what a victory is. There are many ways we win this election. We win this election by getting into the White House. We also win this election by making a strong showing that there is power in the anti-genocide vote, and we are not going to sit back quietly, come whatever. There is also a huge victory just in getting to 5%. If we win 5% of the vote, we then have automatic ballot status in many of the states so that we're not starting over from the very beginning. In most states, you will preserve ballot status if you get between 1 to 5% of the vote in most, not all states. So if we have have 5% overall, that means in many states we are going to achieve the threshold. We will have automatic ballot status so we can start the next race in 2028. We can hit the ground running. We don't have to collect, hundreds of thousands of signatures first. Also, if you get to 5%, you get an automatic support in public funding in the general election, somewhere around $12 million or so, which is very critical for a people-powered campaign. That is huge. So there are many ways we can win this. And above all, remembering that 1 out of 3 eligible voters is not going to vote for either of the predatory political parties. They are votes that can be won by us. We can win votes in our communities. We can win votes by extending our outreach. And that is also what we do with every dollar that you are able to contribute tonight. We are able to bring more organizers online or pay the volunteers who are already doing the work so they can do more of it full time. We create more materials for the flyering, the tabling, the door knocking, the phone banking. We can just really multiply our efforts. We have many, many volunteers, and if we can give them proper support, then we can turn every volunteer into another 100 votes, maybe 500 votes, if we can really ramp up. This is the time when voters are really paying attention to this election. We're getting up electronic billboards and so on. So there are many ways we can really amplify our power at this critical moment. So whatever you are able to provide in support tonight will stand us in good stead, will enable us to really amplify our message to shut this genocide down. Whether we win or not, we are a force. And the stronger we finish, the stronger the pressure will be, and the sooner the day will come when the White House occupant, whoever that is forced to come into compliance with international law and with U.S. law that says it is absolutely illegal to be transferring weapons to the apartheid state of Israel. It is illegal. So I will conclude here just thanking you all so much for really changing history. We really are in that moment where the universe is bending, and I want to mention 2 things. Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will." We are that demand that will move power. We will take power, in fact. And it's Alice Walker, the poet, novelist, Palestinian rights advocate, who said, "The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with." We have it. This is the time to use it. If we get together now and we stay together and we continue building, we are absolutely unstoppable. We are a coalition for justice, peace, and the planet, and our time has come. Thank you so very much.
Give it up, folks, for the next President of the United States of America. So first, I want to thank each and